If you're building an application that has a newsletter that users can subscribe to, one thing you might want to do is have a confirmation workflow for those email addresses from your users. So here's what this might look like. A user could come to your site, enter their email address and submit it, and you could give them a notification to say, hey, we've sent you an email, go check your email. That will include a link that they can click on to redirect them to your website that actually goes through the validation process. Now what happens is behind the scenes, there's some sort of token that's included in that link that your backend needs to know how to parse and use. Now you can see if I look in my test database here, I have a record for my email address as I've been doing testing. I have a Boolean for whether or not the user has been verified. I also have a separate status for subscribed and unsubscribed. So you could be a verified user that is unsubscribed to the newsletter. And then lastly, we have this token here. This token is the thing that's actually included in the link that's sent to them in the email. So when they come back to our website using that link, we parse that token, we search in the database to make sure it exists, and then we go ahead and update that user to be subscribed or verified or whatever it is that you want to call it. But in this video, we're going to see how to build this workflow using Next.js. We're going to use Resend for email. We're going to use Prisma as an ORM to interact with our database, and we're going to use Xata as the actual database that we use to build this out. Now, the last thing you need to know is there is a GitHub repo with the final code for this. So you can check that in the description below. You can go to the GitHub repository, you can download that code, you can look at it there, or you can just follow along from scratch. It's totally up to you. But let's go ahead and get started. All right, so let's start by creating a new Next.js project. I actually created a command or an alias inside of my terminal for this, just called new next. I also have new Astro. So let's call this email verification Next.js. And I'm going to use TypeScript, going to use ESLint, going to use Tailwind, use the source directory, use the app router, and not customize the default alias there because it works for me. I'm curious what your preferences are for all of those different ones. Do you say yes to all of those? Are the ones that you turn off? Let me know in the comments below. But I'm going to open this up inside of the same window that I'm in using the -r flag with the code command. That should open it up. And then I can open my terminal again. We can run this just to see what we got. And we'll go ahead and clean up this project in a second to get rid of all of the starter Next.js code that they give you. So that's all the starter code there. Let's go into the main page and let's give ourselves a little more room here to actually write some code. And inside of here, I'm just going to get rid of all the stuff inside of the main tag. Now, I'm also going to get rid of these classes, and then I'm going to add a couple of base classes to our layout. So if we go into the layout, this is going to be kind of the root layout for the entire application. And we're using Tailwind. Inside of here, I'm going to go ahead and add the main class or main tag, and then we'll wrap the children inside of that. And then I basically want the main tag to take up the entire height and then just basically center everything. So what we're going to say a min height of screen. We'll give this flexbox. We'll say this is flex call. So stacking everything on top of each other. We'll say items, center, and justify center, and then P24 for some padding in there. And then also we'll give this a background of gray 900. Cool. Inside of our tag here, which doesn't need to be main because we've already created that, we can just have a paragraph tag that says subscriber form, and we'll go and obviously replace that in a second. But notice this is centered on the page, which is exactly what we want, and we can kind of get started from there. So inside of source, I'm going to create a components directory, and inside of that, we'll have our subscriber form component. Now I have snippets in here, so RFC is going to stub out a new React component for me. And then we will add that inside of the home page. So we'll just reference the subscriber form, get the auto import there. If you don't get auto import, just make sure to import that. And then this should show the text subscriber form. So now we actually go and build that form. And just in case we need it, we can add an H1 here that says like email confirmation demo. And we'll give this some basic styles as well. So text, 4XL, font, bold, margin bottom 10, for example. It doesn't have to be super fancy, and then maybe, and that should be good. So let's go into our subscriber form. Now inside of here, we're gonna have a kind of a traditional form that you used to, and we're actually gonna use actions in Next.js to handle the submission of this. So we're going to have a form tag. Inside of here, we're going to have an input type of text. And we can add our name and ID. So we'll add email to both of these. We need a label. We don't actually display this, but this is going to be for the email element. And since we don't need this to actually show up, we can give this a class of hidden and then just give the label as email there. Now we're going to use an absolutely positioned button. So we're going to put a div in here with a class name of relative, and then we'll use that to position this button that we're going to move into its own component at some point, but we'll just say like send for now, and then we'll actually create that button next. Now we want to add some classes to our input. So we're going to say this is going to take up the entire width. We're going to give it medium rounding. We're going to add a border. We're going to have border white, and then inside of Tailwind, we can give it an opacity by using this syntax and a 6/7 opacity, which is pretty specific. We'll have a transparent background, have padding 3, specifically padding left of 4. We'll say text white, and let's just see what that looks like for now. So I think that looks okay. Now we'll want to go ahead and create our subscribe button. We're going to create this as a separate component. We'll mention why in a second so that we can show like loading states when submitting our action. So let's create our subscribe button, and we'll go ahead and stub out this component. And this is going to be a button of type submit, which is the default, but we'll go ahead and clarify this. We'll have a class name in here. Let's go ahead and just close this out. That way we can get rid of those squiggly errors. And we're going to have this be absolutely positioned. We're going to have this be 1 in from the right and then 4 in from the top. We can add a hover effect to translate X1. And then inside of this button, I'm going to copy in the SVG that we're going to use, which is like an airplane icon. So let me copy this SVG. We'll throw this inside of this button and get rid of that line. And then let's add our subscribe button inside of the form. And it looks a little bit off in there. I think maybe our top is off. So maybe top of 6. Or maybe even less. And maybe it's right in between at top 3. Okay. And then maybe we want to come a little bit more to the right as well. So I think that looks pretty good. We have our hover effect where it kind of moves over to the right. And I think that looks good enough. It's not perfect, but I think that does look pretty good. So we have the ability to accept our input. Now what happens when we submit, this actually just does the default submit where it puts the properties inside of the URL and does a GET request. So now is where we actually want to create our actions to be able to handle that and start to do something. We're going to need to do database setup. We're going to need to configure resend, etc. But let's go ahead and start to stub out our action so that we know we can do something on the server to be able to start handling this subscribe. So what I'm going to do inside of source is create a folder for actions, and then we'll create our subscribe.tsx. And then inside of here, we'll export const subscribe. And this is going to be an async function. It takes in form data. So this is going to come from the action, and then we'll do something inside of here. Now, one of the things that I like to do is define a return type for this. And we're actually going to do this in TypeScript. So this is going to be a return val of type T, so generic. And then inside of here, we'll have an error message, which will be a string. This will be optional. So error will be optional. And then we'll also have a data property, which is optional, and that'll be of type T. So inside of the subscribe function, if we spell this correctly, we're going to return an object that has maybe an error property and maybe a data property. And then we can use that to be able to check on the front end to see how things went. Now, one of the things you'll see a lot in the Next.js documentation is validating data with Zod. So we can import or add Zod here, and then we need to define a schema for our input, which includes the email. So we can do this for a subscribe schema, and this is going to be Z, and we'll need to import Z from Zod above. And this is going to be an object, and this will have one property, which is email. And this can autocomplete to get rid of name, get rid of that, and that should be good. So we just want to make sure that we're getting an email here. So what we'll do is we'll get the email from the form data.get email. As it autocompletes as string in here, that should come back as a string regardless. But we'll take that, and then we'll want to do a parse of this to validate this data. So we'll say const parsed equals, and then we'll take our subscribe schema and we'll do a safe parse, and we'll pass in an object that has that email property. So we're just trying to make sure that what we're passing in here, this data here, matches the schema that we've defined, which is that email property should be of type email. And then what we'll do is we'll check if the parsed.success is not there, then we can return some sort of error message, and that works fine. So we can do this. And then what we want to do is define our function to return a promise of return val type T, which in this case, I think we're actually, we can just return the token that we generate. We don't have to, but we can. So we'll return an error here that just says invalid email, for example. Otherwise, we'll return, we can just return an empty object, and that will satisfy this. So all we're doing right now is being able to validate that we're actually getting the correct form input, and then we return data back to the user. So the way we start to work with this is inside of our form, we can define an action. And I don't love defining these in line, so I think we should actually create a separate function. So let's create a handle submit, and this will be an async function that takes in form data. And then inside of here, we'll actually call our subscribe action. And I guess we just called it subscribe. So we can start to type this. Hopefully we'll get import. We'll pass in form data. And then what we'll do is from that, we'll await it to get the response, and we'll destructure the error and the data property. All right, so that should look good. And then we'll pass in handle submit here. And the reason I like creating a function inside of this component and then calling the action instead of passing this action in directly is we have the ability to do things on the client after this response comes back. So specifically what we'll do is add a toast notification to show, hey, something went wrong. So it'll look something like what Copilot is guessing at here, where if we have the error, we will log out the error. Otherwise, we can log out just the message of success. So let's just see if this is working. Let's go ahead and run this again. So let's do an npm run dev to get this running. Then we'll open this up back in our browser. And again, not a whole lot is going to happen if we do this right. But one thing we do need to do is, since we're defining this handle submit, this form has now become a client component. So this is one of the things that does get tricky with Next.js. I often forget to do this, but it'll tell you pretty clearly, is because we're defining this function here, we're wanting to do stuff on the client. That means this has to be a client component. So it should be okay. We can type in an email address, and then we can inspect in here and go into the console. We see success. If we were to throw in, I wonder if I can, yeah, I guess if I type in an invalid email address, so something like this, and press enter, you see we get logged back the invalid email. So the validation is actually working, which is good. Now we need to just work on saving this information to the database and then being able to do the confirmation workflow from there. So what we'll want to do is initialize Prisma. So we can do npx Prisma init. And then what that's going to do is generate some boilerplate code for us. And mainly what that's going to do is create our schema.prisma file. So inside of our schema.prisma is where we define what the models are, what the tables are that we're going to work with. Now, by default, this is set up for a provider of Postgres. That's going to work perfectly for what we're going to do. And then it's going to automatically look for an environment variable called database URL. So it automatically generated this for us. We need to create an actual database and replace this in a second. So with this inside of here, I'm going to copy and paste this model for a subscriber, and it's going to be relatively simple. The things we care about most are the email, the verified Boolean, and then the token. Now, there's a couple of properties in here that allow this to work really well with Xata. So that's just kind of boilerplate stuff that I'm throwing in. You can copy and paste it from the final source code. or you could use a regular local Postgres if you wanted to, up to you. But if you're following along with what I'm doing, I'm going to use Xata, which is hosted for us, has lots of other really cool features, and then has these properties to make that work. But the main things we care about are the email string, the verified Boolean, and the token string. So now what we want to do is actually go to Xata, and I'll open up a fresh page in here. All of what I'm doing is free, but after you sign in with your free account, we're going to create a new database, and I'll call this email verification demo. The other one I have is confirmation demo, whatever. And then make sure to check inside of here the beta enabling direct access to Postgres. This allows us to use Xata directly as a Postgres database, which is pretty cool. So after this is created, what we'll do is grab the link that it generates for us. Let's go into the email verification demo. On this kind of starter page, this will have the Postgres endpoint. So we'll copy that. We'll come into our .env and we'll replace what Postgres or what Prisma generated for us. Now, the last thing we need to do is actually replace this API key with our API key. So you can, they have a link in here to get to your account settings, and then I've got a bunch of these, but let's do email verification demo. So you give this a name, save it, and then copy that API key. You won't be able to see that after you create it, so make sure you copy it and have that copied to your clipboard. So that should be complete. Now what we can do is, this is one of the big benefits of Prisma, is we can run npx prisma migrate or Prisma DB push. And then what this is going to do is take that schema and it's going to push it up to our database. So after this finishes, we'll see inside of our Xata database that it has now created the table for us for the subscriber. All right, so it looks like that is finished. If we go back to our workspaces, back to the database that we just created, we should see we now actually have a subscriber table. Now, I do want to call out that Xata is one of my partners, a paid partner that I work with. I've used them in lots of demos. It makes a great use case for these types of demos. One of the really cool features they have is the idea of branching, where you can have separate instances of your database. You can do changes to a separate dev instance, for example, and then merge that into your main branch, which I think is pretty cool. So this is working pretty well. What we want to do is now update this action to be able to work with saving the user to the database. Now I'm going to create a couple of different source files that are going to live under lib. And the first thing we're going to have is a boilerplate thing for Prisma. And this is going to be a TypeScript file. And we're just going to copy this in. This is coming from the Prisma docs, but basically this creates a singleton instance of Prisma. And what that means is as we access Prisma in serverless functions that are spinning up and spinning down, we're not going to be creating a bunch of different instances of Prisma. We're going to get back a singleton, one version of the Prisma thing that we create. So we'll create that, and then we'll also create inside of the lib directory, we'll create a queries file. And the first thing we want to do is actually create a function to create the user. So we'll say export const create user equals async function like this. And this will actually be create subscriber. And this is going to take in two properties. It's going to take in the email, which is a string, and then the token, which we're going to generate for each user. Now, remember, this token is the thing that we're going to include in the link that we send to them in the email, and then be able to parse that thing inside of our logic to verify that they are, or to confirm that they are verified, or their email address is confirmed, or whatever you want to call it. So inside of here, we'll take in those two properties, and then we'll return Prisma, and then we need to import this from our DB file. And then notice in here, we'll get IntelliSense for our database. So we have subscriber table. We will create, and then inside of this object, we'll pass in a data object that has the email and token property. And that should fulfill all the requirements for the actual user. So inside of our action now, subscribe, let us, if we have passed the validation, let's go ahead and create that user. So we'll want to generate a token to start. And to do that, we're going to use the UUID. So UUID package. We'll install that. And then inside of our action, we'll pass the email address and the token to the function that we just created. So for UUID, we're going to import v4 as UUID v4. Yes, and that should be installed, I believe. I think this is arguing about types, so we can do that. So let's install the types for this. So this is a dev dependency, and this is just coming from the types namespace, and that should go away after that comes up. Cool. So we want to first create that new token. We'll say token equals UUID v4, and I think that'll just generate it for us, which is cool. And then from there, we want to create a new subscriber, and we want to call our create subscriber function. So we'll get the import for that. We'll pass in the email and the token. And let's just make sure this should come from the parsed.data.email. Okay, so that should be guaranteed to be there. Now, the one thing we do want to do though, is we want to make sure that we lowercase this email. So let's create a validated email, and this is going to come from parse data email, but we also then want to call to lowercase on this. So we don't have to worry about any issues with someone mistyping their email. We want to make sure that this is all lowercase and we can work with it that way. So from here, we'll pass in the validated email. Cool. And then inside of here, we'll return the new subscriber as the data property. And I think we said this was a return valid string. Let's just do this as any for now. One of my most successful shorts on YouTube ever is joking about in TypeScript how we can fix things by just calling any. And here I am doing it again, but whatever. And then what we care about is in the subscriber form, we want to get back the data, and let's just log out that data. So that data should be a new subscriber. So let's do npm run dev. Let's run this again. And then hopefully what we'll see is, let's refresh this page. Let's run this. I'm going to zoom in on this page a little bit. There we go. And unable to run in the browser environment or has been bundled. Aha, we made one big mistake, which this is good. It's good that I made this same mistake again, and then also good that it gets caught here. All of our actions need to run inside of the server. So to do that, we need to annotate this with userver to make sure that that happens. So let's come back and try to run this again. Glad we got to experience that together. Yes. Let's press enter. And then notice we didn't have a loading state in here, which we can fix, but we do have the subscriber that was created. And then if we look in here, we see that this record has been created. Now notice also that the verified property here is created for us. And if we look inside of our schema Prisma, we have a default of false for our verified. So anytime we create a new subscriber, unless we specifically say they are verified, it's going to have a default of not verified, which is good. That's exactly what we want. So from here, what we need to do is generate the email for them and then be able to include like different pages for them to go to. So let's do a couple of the pages to start. And one of the pages that we'll want is the page we redirect them to after they have sent their email in. So inside of the app, let's create a new folder. And inside of this new folder, we'll have a subscriber directory. Inside of that, we'll have a pending directory. And then inside of that, we'll have a page.tsx. Let's create a new component. And let's call this pending page. And this is going to be relatively simple. This is just kind of a placeholder page that says like, hey, check your email is basically what it's going to say. So let's just throw in this markup. Just going to paste this in. It's got a h1 and a p tag with some Tailwind styling. So what this means is from the subscriber form, now if we get back where we don't have an error, we basically have success, we can redirect the user to that pending page. So we can do this using use router. This is coming from Next navigation, and we'll get the router from that. And then inside of here, we can use router.push and send that user to /subscriber/pending. And again, this is just going to send up a notification to the user to say, hey, we're working on it. It's basically what that comes down to. So inside of here, we can add our email, press enter, and then we get redirected, which is great. So that works, and it gives you the instructions to go and check your email. One problem though is that we just generated this record again. So we could handle this a couple of different ways. We could update our action to be able to query the database first to see if that email exists. We could also, inside of our schema, we could add a unique property to our email. So we could add in the unique tag here. And then what we'll need to do is npx prisma db push. And I think this may give us an issue because we already have 2 emails now. So it may have to wipe out the database. We'll see what it says. All right, so I think it's saying if there are unique or duplicates, it will fail, which is fine. Okay, so it said failed based on that. So let's go in and delete the record, that one. And then now we should be able to apply this new schema change on top of that because we don't have duplicates in emails yet. So this is a good way to handle this by having this built into the database and the schema. And then what we'll want to do is actually check the error that comes back if we try to insert and see what that error looks like. And then we can pass back an appropriate message. So this will be inside of the action subscribe. We can call the new subscriber, and then we'll want to surround this with a try catch like so. And let's just see what this error looks like. So let's log out this error. So if we get something that is, yeah, that will work. So if we get something coming back, then we can check what the error message is and then update this as something more specific. So let's run this again, and then we'll just run through that whole scenario and test it out. All right, so let's come back to our home page. And let's type in this email. And then I just want to see what that error actually is on the server. And it may be this code P2002, Prisma P2002. And this says unique constraint failed. So that is very specific. So what we would want to do is add some logic in here to say if the error.code equals P2002, return error email already exists. Otherwise, we will just return something more generic. And why is this type of unknown? We could probably just say that's okay. We could say if error.code. So we could add an optional chaining here. And let's just mark this as any just to kind of bypass this for now. But if this error has a code that equals that, we'll send back the unique constraint message for the client. Otherwise, we'll have the failed to subscribe. Now, one of the things we will add at the end of this is an actual pop-up display so the users can get a toast message. But let's see, this says email already exists. That's good. If we go back and wipe out this email, this should be able to happen successfully. So if we wipe this out, come back and submit again, this should be successful and then send us over to the pending page. So that's great. So now we'll work on getting our emails ready to send to users, which will have the token inside of that link. And then that email will then redirect them back to our application to run more logic. So now we need to get set up with Resend to be able to send those emails. All right, so I am logged into Resend. You can sign up here for free. You can see I've been doing a lot of testing with these confirmation emails, which is fine. That's just how it is. But this is what we're going to do as well. So inside of Resend, the main thing that you'll want to have is an API key. So inside of your API keys, you'll need to generate one for this demo. Now, we're not going to get into actually setting up your own custom domain. We're just going to use kind of the test things that are available to us. If you'd like to see a video on actually like publishing this and having a final workflow, let me know in the comments below. But this will be the email verification demo. And we can say this just wants to have sending access, and this will be for all domains for now. And then we will copy this, and then we'll need to add this into our environment variable as well. So we have our Prisma one. Now we're going to have the resend API key and just paste in the API key there. So we have that set up. Now we didn't actually start working on generating an email template that we can work with. And to do this, we're going to use React Email and the React Email components. So React Email is a local dev environment to be able to view and test your emails before you send them. That's really cool. And then there's also React Email components that we need to install also. So we'll have this one there. So we can copy both of these. Let's install the components. And then additionally, we can install React Email. So let's do both of these things. And then the way this works is we're going to need to have inside of our source folder or inside of top level folder, it doesn't really matter. But inside of here, we'll have a folder for emails. And then inside of that, we'll have a file for confirmation email. And I think they were lowercasing theirs in their examples. I would typically make that uppercase, but in their examples, I think they lowercase that. So we'll have the confirmation email. And then this is where we'll start to build out our email template. Now, if we do a search for React email examples, they have some really good examples in here that you can start with. They have verify email address from AWS and from Linear and Notion and Plaid, etc. So they have some really good things in here that you can use to start. This is also what the React email dev server looks like. So that's what we will run here in a second. But inside of this, we want to start to leverage these components that come from React email components. So to start, I'm going to add a Tailwind component, and then we're going to wrap our entire thing with this Tailwind component, which allows us to write Tailwind inside of this function. So we are going to import this Tailwind from React email components. I think this is the namespace React email. Cool. And then this is probably saying we need children inside of here. So we're saying we can use Tailwind in here. We're going to have the HTML element, which is like this, and that will come from the components as well. And then we'll have the language as English. And this is going to come, I'm not sure why I'm not getting imports here. And it looks like I may need to do the import of React, which I usually get rid of that. For some reason, that's necessary now. If you know why, let me know in the comments. But I guess that's something I need to do. I'm not sure. So inside of this, we'll have a head tag. So that's also going to come from our components up here. I'm not getting any IntelliSense. So we'll import the head. And I think this is a self-closing tag. So we'll just do head like that. And then we can have the preview component. And the preview component will say, confirm your email address. And am I still not going to get any? Nope. No help in here. So I guess we'll have to do all of these manually. So we'll have our preview component, and then we'll have the body component. This will be above the body, and we'll import body. We're also going to need a few others. So we'll have container and text and link, I believe. And inside of the body, we'll add a container. Now this will kind of be what container is in Bootstrap, where it's going to center the content and then give it some padding on the outside. And then we can start with a heading, and we can import this as well. So inside of our heading, I'm going to say something kind of vague like you are almost there. And then what's cool is we can add Tailwind classes to say text to XL, for example. And then we'll have a piece of text, and it kind of has this for us. Cool. And then this text will have some classes if we need them. But let's go and actually see what it looks like to run React email. So to run React email, we'll cd into the source directory, and then we will npx react email and dev. And actually, let's back out of that really quickly. Let's run our application. So we'll need two different terminals here. Let's do npm run dev to get our Next.js application running at localhost 3000. And then we will run React email at localhost 3001. So if we go over to localhost 3001, we should see a list of our emails here, and then we can click on one of these templates and actually see what this looks like. So that is really cool to be able to visualize what these emails are before you send them. And then we will want to have another text component. Inside of here, we will have our props.link. Now these props are going to come from props that we actually pass inside of here. So we can say our props, we're going to destructure the link. We'll also want the email, I believe. And then we can just type this with link string and email string. So those are the two props we need to pass to this confirmation email. And then we can reference not props.link, but just the actual link. Now we can give some styles here as well. So we can say like BG gray 200 or something, and then center the text, and then add some padding as well. So we can do 4 on the outside and PY of 2 to give that a little bit of breathing room. Now that just kind of shows an empty box. Also want to do a rounded MD. So to test this, let's just log out an actual website. So here's my personal website, jamesqquick.com. So that's what this will look like. Now, one of the things I do want to change is in the body, for example, let's add some styles, and let's just do font sans to do a sans serif font. So it'll look a little bit better. So that's the basics of what we need, which is pretty cool. So let's go back and add this to be props.link. And I said we needed actually this should be just the link. And I said we needed 2 properties, one for the email. I think we actually don't need that. I think we can just get by with the link. So now we'll actually want to work on sending this email. So inside of our lib folder, let's create a new file for emails, or email. And we're going to export a function, send confirmation email. And this is going to take in those same properties. So email string, token string, and then we can let Copilot close it out for us. And then we want this to be an async function. Now, since we're using Resend in this case, we actually need to install Resend into our application. I think, let's restart that. I actually meant to stop the Next.js. So let's install the Resend package, and then we can start to work with this here. So we can say Resend is going to come from creating a new instance of Resend and passing in. See if we get our IntelliSense for this. Still no. I don't know what's up with my IntelliSense, but we're going to pass in our API key, which is going to come from process.env.resend API key. And we will import Resend from the Resend package. All right, so we're creating a new instance of Resend. We then want to create a from address. And this from, we could have it come from an environment variable like it's suggesting here. I'm going to add a template string in here. And this is going to use this could actually be a regular string, but it's going to use the onboarding at resend.dev email. So anytime you're doing an example with Resend and you don't have your own domain, you'll use the onboarding at resend.dev. All right, and then we actually want to send this. So we can send this by calling resend.emails.send, and then we'll pass in a configuration object. Inside of here, we'll have the from property, which we've already defined. We'll have the to property be the email, yes. We'll have the subject be the confirmation or confirm your email. And then we will backtrack out of the HTML because we actually want to use our component that we just created. So we'll say this is going to use React, and it'll be React create element. And this will be based on the confirmation email that we created. And then we'll pass in the properties of the link. And above, I think we maybe took autocomplete here from Copilot. That should have been the link, not the token. And in this case, we will need our import from React. So what we're saying is we're going to send an email to the person's email address from the onboarding email. It'll have a subject of confirm your email. And then inside of here, we'll use the React component as the template for this email. And then at the end of this, we will return the response. So if we go back to our subscribe action, after we have created the user, let's not return the new subscriber. Let us continue. And with that subscriber, we want to send confirmation email. What did we just call that function? Yep, send confirmation email. And we'll pass in the validated email and the link that we need to define. So we'll say our link is going to be something. We need to import the send confirmation email. Did we spell that right? And did we export it? Export send confirmation email. None of my imports are working for some reason, but we can import this. So we'll import send confirmation email from lib send email. This will actually just be email. Cool. All right, so we should get that import. We will come down here. We'll create a link, which we'll do in a second. We'll get back a response. And after we send that, we can return, or we can check that's actually a good point. We can check the error property on the response coming from email. We'll send back an error message that says failed to send that email address or that email, which is fine. And then lastly, if that's not the case, we can just return back a data property of subscribed, and we can say, check your email to confirm. And that should be pretty good. Now I want to go back and have this be just a string. So instead of returning back the new subscriber, which we got rid of, we're just returning back a string, which is the data. And actually, it doesn't really matter what we put in here. I usually use the data property if we need to pass back some sort of data. We don't have to have that. But inside of the subscriber form, what we can do is we can still log this out and just show that that worked. So let's do an npm run dev. Let's get back up our local host. Here, let's go back to the home page. All right, we'll do our email, press enter. We still need a loading state for this button. All right, so we've got the email already exists down there. So that means we need to get rid of our email, which makes sense. And let's try this again. So let's send this. All right, it says subscription pending. We should see this inside of our database. And then if we check our email, hopefully we'll have something there as well. All right, so we did get an email. It has an empty link, and that's because we forgot to actually create the link. So that's good. That makes sense. We need to come to our action, and then inside of here, we need to actually generate this link. So in this link, it'll be a template literal string, and we want to pass them to a confirm route. And we actually will do something very similar to this, where we will have the base URL, I think is what I called it. We'll have an environment variable for the domain that we're running on. So we'll need to create this environment variable. And then we're going to send them to /confirm and then pass in the token as a query parameter. So it should look like that. Inside of .env, we'll have our next public base URL. This will be localhost 3000. When you deploy this, you would update this to your actual domain. And then that link should be good. All right. And then let's go ahead and create inside of subscriber. Let's create a folder for confirm. And then we'll create a page here. And we can go ahead and do a little bit of this logic. So let's just say that we want to create a new component inside of here. This will be the confirm page. And we want to get the props that include the search parameters. So we can say confirm page props. That's right. We want to get the search params. Search params. This is passed to us by default to a page. And then from that, we want to get the token string. And this could be, then we can reference this inside of here. So we'll destructure the search params and say this has a type of confirm page props. From the search params, we can get the token from the search params. And then we want to use that token to actually look the user up in the database. So inside of our queries, we need to export a new function, const get user by token, and we'll pass in the token string. Let's see what they do here. And instead of find unique, we can do find first. And then that will allow us to pass in our where condition, and we're doing a where based on the token matching the one that we just created. So if we get that, let's call that function. So existing, and did we call that, let's call this subscriber. Get subscriber by token is existing subscriber equals await get subscriber by token. We will not get the auto import for that, which is unfortunate. This will be an async function. And let's go and import the get subscriber by token from the queries in lib. And we could probably use, I'm not sure this is actually wrong. I think this is right. I think there may be something going on with my editor. We'll confirm that in a second. So inside of this confirm page, we will say if there's no existing subscriber, we could do a bunch of different things. We could throw an error, for example, and we can handle that with error handling. So we could throw a new error and just say invalid token or something like that. And then if that user does exist, we want to update that user to be verified. So we can create one more function in here. So export const update subscriber to verified. This will be an async function. We will pass in an ID property, and we can return await Prisma update. And then we want to update where the Xata underscore ID property matches the ID property that we just got submitted. And then the data will be verified of true. And this should be prisma.subscriber.update. Okay, so if we get back an existing subscriber, now we want to update subscriber to verified and pass in the existing subscriber dot Xata ID. All right, and then we can get from queries update, what was it? Update subscriber to verified. All right, I'm gonna close VS Code and open it back up because I feel like it's just really off. 1 second. All right, so I restarted VS Code and it looks like these imports are coming in okay. So I'm not really sure what was going on there. On the confirm page, we just want to display the fact that they are confirmed. And so we can add a little bit of context on this page to say that. So verified, we want to get their email. This can come from the existing subscriber. So existing subscriber.email. Cool. And then the last thing we'll want to handle is the actual error case where we don't get the user. And then we can do this on this page by handling inside of confirm, creating an error.tsx. And I don't do much very unique in here, but let us just add a little bit of context, and I'll add another H1 in a paragraph that says, and double check the confirmation email link. Nothing super fancy there. So I think this should be all the logic. Let's go and test this out. So let's go back to our database. Let's wipe out the subscriber. Let's come back to the running application, go back to the home page. All right, let us submit this again. We still need to add a loading state to the button. So that should have sent the email. If we come back to database, we see verified as false. Come back to email, we should show a new message. Here's the confirm one that passes in the token, and it says it can't be found. So this went to, it's because we didn't send it to subscriber /. So let's go back to our action for this URL. And in the link, it should be /subscriber/confirm, which means we'll have to go through that whole process again. So let's go back to localhost. Or actually, let's just go back to where we were and just manually enter this. So subscriber/confirm. And our error component must be, we've missed every opportunity to define our client and server components. So don't be like me. Think about that before you actually submit. Cool. So then this says verified. So it seems like that worked. Let's confirm inside of our database. And we do have a verified of true. So that's good. That's the whole workflow. The one other thing that I did want to show you is in the subscribe button, you can show state in there. And let's take a look at what that looks like. So inside of the button, we can have this be, I'll remember it this time, a use client component. And then we'll use the use form status. There we go. And then from this, we'll destructure a property of pending. And then we basically want to conditionally display a loader of some sort. So I'm going to add in the logic here. Let me go down and make sure I finish this out. So this should be like that, I believe. Cool. And so what we're saying here is while this thing is actually submitting or while it's pending, we want to display a loader. This just comes from Tailwind. And then otherwise we'll show the regular icon that we had. So we may be able to see this without having to go through the full workflow or delete the user. You'll probably see this for just a split second. So loader, and then it finished. And the last thing we wanted to do, is we want to install React Hot Toast. This will just take a second, so it's easy to add in. I've been adding this to all my demos recently, and it's been super cool. And what we want to do is import the toaster. And I don't think we have to do anything else. I think that's it. And then inside of our subscriber form, we'll just add back that feedback. So we'll say toast.error, and we'll send back that error message. Import toast from React Hot Toast. Then this one will do toast.success. And we probably should have labeled this like success message or something, whatever. And let's just say as string. Will that get rid of it for us? Yeah. So we'll just assume that thing is there because logically we know it is. So let's do a restart of our application. Let's restart or refresh this page here. All right, now let's get our email address in there. We see the loading state. We should see the message pop up saying already exists. Let's do one more test to make sure the success message shows. And the cool thing is, even though we change pages, this should still pop up the success message and show too. So if we click, it says check your email to confirm. So we get that. And then we are redirected to the right page too. So a lot of really cool stuff. I love Resend for sending emails. I love React Email for building the emails with the components and the local dev environment for testing them. I think that's awesome. And Xata has been my go-to for a database for a long time. I do want to shout out ingest with resend email workflow. So ingest is used for doing like asynchronous workflows. And they have an email sequence tutorial where you can build an email sequence with resend. So basically, like if a user hasn't opened their email after a day, send them another email. Or if they have opened an email, send them a more specific email as a next step or whatever. So I think that's really cool. Ingest is something I'm looking into more for doing some of those asynchronous workflows. And anyway, just check that out and see what you think. I used ingest on a hackathon project, really small hackathon project recently in the last week, and just got a taste of it. It's pretty cool. I think it's really powerful, especially in the serverless world. So it's something worth looking at. Anyway, another longer tutorial. Hope you enjoyed the video. What other topics would you like to see covered in future tutorials? Let me know in the comments below, but I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll catch you next time.